Welcome to FemLead, the podcast on female leadership and role models. This show aims to inspire and equip you with the tools you need to navigate your career plans. FemLead brings inspiring career perspectives and strategies to guide your path to success. Your host, Alexandra, will interview role models on new, exciting topics with each episode. If you like what you hear, give us a review and subscribe to the show on your preferred streaming platform. Enjoy.
Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of FemLead. Today we have planned a transformational interview, a discussion about how to pivot your career and how to become an ally for inclusive leadership. My next guest is a science business leader with over 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical and biotech industries with a passion for people development and making a difference. She has a proven track record of inspiring and driving cross-functional teams and multicultural teams to deliver results for her leadership positions at global companies like Carlsberg, Novo Nordisk, and for her nonprofit organization, Professional Women of Color, Denmark. Phaedria Marie St joins us today. She has over 45 publications and patent applications within chemistry and biochemistry. She is a role model for science and for leadership, and she is passionate about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and changing the gender and race narrative. Phaedria has a multitude of skills, and she's a great speaker. She decided today, and she accepted today to join us to discuss her transformational career journey and life mission, as well as steps to build inclusive leadership within organizations. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Phaedria today. Hi, Phaedria, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here at FemLead. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Alexandra. And thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about our conversation.
It's really a pleasure. I mean, we had a very, very nice intro call the other day, and I'm very inspired by your journey. And as I said in the intro, we want to talk about something very important, which is transformation. And transformation is a very personal subject. It will not look the same for everyone. And Phaedria here will tell us her journey and also share advice on how you can successfully move forward in your career by not sticking to one career path, which I think it's very interesting. And I'm sure some of the listeners are now considering what is next for them, and they don't know where to start. So we are going to cover this subject. We are going to talk about transformational journey, and we are also going to share that in the end, everything will turn out okay, which is a positive message to end the interview with. But we will not
that's
only
absolutely true.
Fantastic. I love it. And we will not only talk about that, we will also talk about your mission of empowering professional women of color with ProWalk Denmark. And we will go through the mission of the organization and talk a little bit about that. So there's plenty of things to cover. And I want to start directly with a deeper question, which is, Phaedria, what do you consider makes a career successful?
Well, that's a very interesting question, in the sense that, of course, we're here to talk about careers and successful careers. And in the traditional sense, a successful career is measured by outcome and by impact. So often you would have somebody entering an industry in an entry-level position and then ending up in the C-suite, where they're responsible for maybe the whole company and have a huge impact on the success of the company, but also the product that they might deliver to the world. And if that is done in record time, of course, people think that, oh, wow, that's a very successful career. And then if you think in terms of if you're a researcher, then maybe your success is more measured by impact. How many patents do you have? What inventions from my industry? How many drugs have you put on the market? So all of these are, tangible measures of success. Like if you're a writer, are your books, have you won a Pulitzer Prize? Because that's another dimension of a successful career, the accolades that you would get, the recognition that you have. And of course, these are, good measures. But for me, a successful career is more than your personal achievements. I tend to think more in terms of a career legacy and a successful life. Because a career, in my opinion, is just one component of your life, of who you are. And so if in your journey to have a successful outcome, you should ask yourself certain questions. Who have you helped along the way? How have you contributed to your industry? Have you had to compromise your ethics, your integrity to get where you are? And these are all, depending on the answer to those questions, then for me, I would set a question mark as to whether that is indeed a successful career. So at the end of the day, I focus on having a career legacy. When you are no longer there, what does your industry look like? How many people have been mentored and sponsored and supported by you? How have you made the industry grow? How have you had a lasting impact on the world? And then the second dimension is also a successful life. As I said, your career or your work, it's a part of your life, but ideally it should be aligned with your purpose. What are you here on earth for? What do you want to achieve? So if you can marry the two, have a fantastic career legacy that's aligned with your purpose, then that's a successful career, a successful life.
Fantastic. It's very inspirational, because I'm sure that when you started your career, you didn't have this idea. Like, it wasn't necessarily whenever you had your first job, you're like, okay, now I'm going to focus on my career legacy. So tell us, when was that moment when you realized that it's not about the outcome anymore, or not only about the outcome? Because I think a lot of listeners and viewers are considering the outcome because this is how they are being benchmarked against, and this is what their managers and the executive team of wherever they are now working are looking at. But when do you make that personal choice to look around and be like, it's not just about that?
And you mentioned something that's absolutely essential. One of the reasons that career has persisted in being measured by outcomes, it's because of the system and what executive management look at, how people are rewarded, how they are promoted, how they are recognized. And for me, the sooner the better, if you can come to that realization, but that wasn't the case for me. As you rightfully pointed out, from a very early age, I had a great interest in science. And I was born in a very small island in Dominica. And for me to develop and pursue that interest in science, it meant that I had to emigrate to the US. And I ended up having a PhD in chemistry from Duke University. And at that point, I also had the linear view, because in my mind, now I have a PhD in chemistry. I'm going to have the academic career. I'm going to win the Nobel Prize before I'm 50. And, it's just going to go upwards. And then I would be a tremendous success. And, I don't have a Nobel Prize. And I no longer work actively in science, in research. I do work in science, but I no longer do research. And am I no longer a success? No, I don't think so. So after my PhD in chemistry, I wanted to do a postdoc, and I wanted to try something else. I'm very curious about different cultures. And so it was essential for me that I left the US. And then I came to Carlsberg in Denmark, Carlsberg Research Laboratory in Denmark. And one of the things that was key to me was that they were doing cutting edge research. It was a very well renowned lab at the time. And so I wanted to be there with the brightest and the best. And of course, it was temporary, because according to my linear career plan, I go there, I spend 2 years, and then I go back to the US and kickstart my academic career. Sometimes life throws things in your way and you have to deal with it. So within the 3 years, I met my Danish husband. And living Denmark was not an option. So suddenly I have to build a career in Denmark. But of course, the option was to build an academic career in Denmark. So I worked as a group leader, a director of research and development in a small biotech company. And again, still the focus is I'm going to have this academic career. I'm going to have the Nobel Prize. And for many of you who work within research, you know that it's 24/7. You always have to be in the forefront. You know, you read the papers, you do the experiments, you design them, you think about it, you write the papers, you publish, you go to conferences, repeat. And basically that was my life. And I have to admit, at that time, I did not consider it a balanced life. I had not much time to do other things that I enjoyed. But I was very happy. I was absorbed in what I was doing because it was my passion. Again, in this way, I would make an impact because I would develop this groundbreaking, revolutionary drug and change the world. And then I had my first kid, another curveball. And being in a country where I'm away from my family, I don't have the normal support system. So having to navigate that and balance that with an academic career was extremely challenging for me. And as serendipity would have it, at the same time, the company that I worked for, the biotech company, was bought by another pharmaceutical company. So I transitioned into the role as a principal scientist. And then I also had the opportunity to go to business school and get a business degree. And I'm like, why not? I'm going to do it. So there I was, leading a team, being a department manager, being responsible for the science, going to business school and having a 2-year-old. And it was extremely challenging, but by the grace of God, with the support of friends, I managed it. But still, I had not clearly made the intention that I was going to change my career. I was still continuing onto, okay, maybe not academic research, but being an industrial research in the pharmaceutical industry. And again, you have no control of the situation. Then suddenly the whole project was closed, the department was closed. And here I was again faced with, okay, so what do you do? Do you continue to be a principal scientist? Or now that you have this business degree, should you do something else? And then an opportunity arose within something completely different in procurement, supply chain, something that I had absolutely no experience with. But when I looked at the opportunity, I thought, one, it would be a way of getting a better work-life balance. 2, I can really learn something. And 3, it could be a way to transition into a different aspect of my career, go more into leadership and strategy instead of just being a principal scientist. But even then, it was not a clear, fast goal for me. And I took the opportunity. And was it easy? No. Was it challenging? Because the learning curve was extremely steep. But the other interesting thing was that I found myself in an identity crisis because I was no longer the researcher. I was no longer the principal scientist. Who was I?
Yeah.
What was my purpose?
I was about to mention that everything you just mentioned, your journey, that was obviously part of me asking as well, is very much linked with you seeing the opportunities and deciding I'm gonna go for it, which in itself, it's a brave step, because we discuss a lot about luck and about being the right person and about taking the right opportunity. And the question is, how many of us see those opportunities and decide, you know what, this is it? Mm-hmm. Because you could have also said, this is not for me, I'm going to wait and see. But you didn't do that, yeah. Right? So isn't it also a matter of mindset and of, in a way, getting out of your comfort zone? Because that's something that relates also with your identity. How do you see yourself after you make those next steps?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it would be simple to say, oh, okay, you have to be a person who just jumps into things, and that's how I am. Since my childhood, I would take risks. It's something my parents, well, one of my parents encouraged, but I think that would be too simplistic. I think it's important that in your journey through life, that you have your personal advisory board, you have your tribe or your cohort, you have people that you trust who will tell you like it is. They're not going to sugarcoat, they tell you the real truth. And so in making that decision, I consulted my mentor at work, my leader. I consulted some of my friends. And so I got a lot of different inputs. And I also articulated my concerns, my fears, because a lot of time it's the fear that holds us back, the fear of the unknown, the fear of what is going to happen. And one of the things that one of my professors had told me way back was, you can let things happen to you, or you can make things happen for you. And if you let the fear hold you back, then you're just letting things happen to you. And the other thing somebody else told me along the way when I was stressing about, oh, my career path is not linear, I'm not getting as promoted as quickly as I should. They're like, career is a funny thing. There are different ways of going around. It can be circular. There are different stepping stones. So don't sweat it. And as long as when I accepted that, then the other thing I said to myself, very few decisions are irreversible. So jump in, try it out. But at the same time, you have to be self-aware. You have to be in tune with your inner self so that you can really understand if something is not right for you or if it's the fear. You have to be able to differentiate between that. Right?
Yes.
And when you can differentiate that, if it's not right for you, you need to get out as quickly as possible.
Yes, exactly. So very few decisions are irreversible. That I love. It's very true. And we, for some reason, get stuck on the idea that once I decided I need to go to the right, I can never come back. And I'm happy you've mentioned it, because one of the questions that I had is, when you pivot, because you've pivoted your career a couple of times, but it wasn't until later in your journey that you realized that the academic career might not be that aim. What was your then plan B? So when people make changes, but they're not sure what the change will then entail for them, do you have a safety plan, or do you feel that is there something that really made you feel comfortable with those decisions? And I'm asking that for some of the listeners that no matter what we share, they will never feel comfortable doing having the risk, taking the risk. Is there something that you consider for yourself to, in a way, create a safety net for yourself?
That's a really good question. And I think there could be many reasons why people are hesitant and don't want to take the risk. A very common one has to do with your financial situation. And that's, I'm privileged in the sense that I have a fairly good financial situation. So that enabled me to take certain risks. But also, that's not to say that I am rich. I have consciously chosen to use to live what I would consider a simple life. And so I don't spend a lot of money on, fancy clothes and cars and homes and so on. I try to live as very simple as possible. And so If my financial foundation is taken away, then I don't really have the concern that I will not be able to manage. And of course, I only have one child, so that also makes it. So that's one of the considerations that can impact somebody's risk. And so you know what's best for your situation, but as early as possible, plan for that. I mean, I've been planning my financial foundation since I was quite young, actually.
And it's I'm happy you mentioned this, because wealth management and financial literacy and in general, taking care of your finances on your own and not waiting for something to happen or a big, I don't know, investment to go through. Those are, I think, thoughts that for some reason, some people leave them at the end. I'll figure out that part as long as I get the job. And this is a very important part of financial freedom. I had an interview with one of the co-founders of Female Invest, who told in the interview that financial freedom means more steps to gender equality, because then women don't need to worry about not being financially free to take decisions, because that's a big bottleneck. If you cannot take decisions knowing you will have enough money to support yourself, you're not going to take a decision. You're going to wait, or you're going to stay in a situation that's not good for you because you don't have an option. So first step is to consider those logistics, financial means as basic for your development. If you have a base on this, it will be easier to consider what's next.
Yeah. So financial freedom is the gateway to taking risk and living your purpose, because it's not something you have to worry about. That's one aspect. And the second aspect is, maybe concerns about expectations others might have of you, parents, spouse, friends. And again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, self-awareness, self-responsibility, spending time reflecting, doing courses so you can understand what your purpose is. Because once you know what your purpose and your passion is, then in some ways it makes the decisions easier. So that, combined with the minimal financial risk, is a good combination. For example, one of the things that I have come to realize is that one of my true passions or purpose is to develop people, help them achieve their full potential. And when I look back, this is something I have done all my life, even as a little kid in elementary school. And so recognizing that, then it's a question of thinking what career or what, I would prefer to use the word life activity, what life activity I can engage in that helps me fulfill that purpose. And if that can be monetized, even better. Again, the combination of career and purpose and life, it's key.
Definitely. And for those of our listeners that they see life moving forward, but they don't have necessarily, they haven't really grabbed the reins of it, how do you advise them to take the first step in their transformation journey? So if they already know, I need to go in a different direction, but I don't know what's the first step, what do you advise them to do?
Yeah. And that's a good question. I just want to point out one thing that you said, because sometimes the trigger for your transformational journey, it's not of your own doing. It's not of your control. And I think there'll be a difference in how you react. Because if it's not of your own choosing, then you need time to process, especially if you've not been prepared, you've not been mentally preparing yourself, making sure you have the skill sets, well, a broad range of skill sets, making sure that you are psychologically ready to put yourself out there. So if you're in the situation where life happened to you and you're forced to make the transformation, the first thing is to be gentle with yourself. accept the situation, accept it's going to be uncomfortable, accept it's going to be awkward, accept it's a transitional period that you're not sure what you want. And in that acceptance, focus on the process of becoming. Having said that, it's not just floating, without a plan, because I mentioned earlier, it's important to have your tribe or your personal advisory board. And so for me, the next logical step would be to spar or have a soundboarding session, with your personal advisory board. Get a coach if you need to, because it's very important that sometimes we have blind spots. We don't really see things as they should be. And then having a coach can be essential in helping uncover those blind spots and helping you come to the decision as to where you need to go. And even if it was not something that happened to you, but something that you actively chose, I think the same thing applies. I spoke to a young woman recently, actually yesterday, and she was unsure what her career path would be. And she's been a leader for many years, and now she's on maternity leave. And now, you have a lot of time. She's reflecting and wondering what her next career path would be. And again, through the discussion, the conclusion was that you do need a coach. You need somebody to help you approach it systematically so you can figure out what are the different options. And once you have the different options, then don't be afraid of experimenting and testing. Again, no, very few decisions are irreversible. So it's a question of, having a plan, doing the analysis, getting inputs from others, and say, this is what I want to do. This is okay, plan A, testing it out. If it doesn't work, go to plan B, go to plan C, and be comfortable with being in an uncomfortable transition.
It's also about accepting what is happening and not trying to deny it, right? Because it's harder to say, this is wrong. Why is this happening to me? Rather than say, this is part of the journey. There's something here that I will definitely learn from. And stepping into something new is, in my personal experience, most times uncomfortable because you just don't have that same understanding and control that you like to have or that you would normally have when you know what the next step is. So fighting it, in a way, for some people, adds to a feeling of discomfort, anxiety, not knowing what is next. And probably the easiest thing is sitting with it and being like, it will turn out okay. I've talked with several people who had similar situations, and they all told me it turns out okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, for me, it's not fighting the feelings, acknowledging them, processing them, and not getting stuck in the feelings, because it's legitimate, right? It's a life-changing thing that happened to you. So it's only natural that there will be moments of anxiety or stress or doubt. And the important thing is to accept, acknowledge, process, move on.
Very, very wise. Thank you so much, Phaedria. This is great. I love it. It's probably one of the interviews where I deep dive from the beginning, and we talked so much about the steps that you took in your journey. And I would like now to go and discuss a little bit your thought leadership, because you are a leader of inclusive leadership, and you promote the topic of inclusive leadership in large companies in Denmark. You are a speaker, you go to conferences and discuss your life mission and how you impact others and how you mentor the next generation of leaders. And I would like for you to define for us, what is inclusive leadership?
Okay. I think I'd just like to take a step back. One of the, I would say the hot topics, or there's a lot of attention and focus, is diversity. and how it's really good for companies. It's good for innovation. You have different perspectives, and that's absolutely true. However, to be able to reap the benefits of diversity, then you need inclusion. If you don't have inclusion, it can't work, and you won't reap the benefits. And so that's where you come in as a leader. As a leader, you are the cultural bearers of an organization. The success of an organization depends on how effective you are as a leader. So as a leader, it's absolutely essential that you know how to lead diverse groups of people and make sure that they can work together effectively, harness the potential that lies in the differences for a really good outcome for the company. And the way to doing that is has to do with your own biases as a leader. We all have biases, and bias is one of the barriers to inclusion. And so for me, to be an inclusive leader, you have to overcome your own bias and ensure that every single person on your team, but also your peer leaders, feels respected, feels treated equally, feels included, that they are not afraid to contribute, that they understand and appreciate that their inputs and opinions will be seriously, and not just perfunctory, seriously taken into consideration and used in the decision making, used in the product development, that they feel a strong sense of belonging in the organization. I mean, McKinsey recently did a report, and there's a huge correlation between an employee's sense of belonging to an organization and their engagement. And that will be reflected in the bottom line, the profitability and the performance of the organization. So as an inclusive leader, it starts with yourself. I mean, everything starts with self-awareness, right? And being able to overcome your bias, your blind spots, and make sure that you can, as the word says, include everyone.
Yeah, very, very thoughtful. Thank you so much, Phaedra. This is great. I'm going to move on because I want to go through a couple of other topics as well, including Professional Women of Color Denmark.
Yes.
And you mentioned in our call and in your bio as well, you talk about mentorship as an essential part of your story. And you are a thought leader, but also the president and founder of ProWalk. And you built a community of strong-minded women that support each other. So why did you choose to start Professional Women of Color, and what's the organization's mission?
Okay. And I'll try to keep my answers short. I can talk a lot. I think it goes back to my purpose and my background. Growing up, I grew up in a home where there was focus on gender equality. It was not something that was articulated or spoken about, but by the way my mother behaved, she worked, which was unusual for most of the other women in the village that I grew up in, didn't work. I have two brothers and a sister, and in the home, the boys had to clean, they had to make food also, they had to wash clothes. And so growing up, I always felt that there was nothing I couldn't do, and my gender or my skin color was a barrier. However, when I moved from my country of Dominica, moved to the US and to Denmark, then it was a completely different messaging. And I'm fortunate that, again, I grew up with this belief that, my gender, my ethnicity my age is not a barrier to what I want to do. But at the same time, I could see this is not the same for everybody else. And so I got involved in groups like Women in Chemistry, Women in Science of Engineering, and, mentoring and providing support and community to other women. And then when I came to Denmark, I had the privilege of coming into a job. And so you could say my career here it went okay. It went fine. And I continued doing, one-on-one mentoring, both men and women of, all races. In my time in Denmark, I became friends with this woman, Selim Ablo Nielsen. And, we always talked about the situation in Denmark, that if you are not Danish, or if you come to this country without a job, then it's extremely difficult for you to get into the labor market. And sometimes even when you get into the labor market, then having an upward career trajectory can be very difficult. And the other thing we would talk about is that there were very few positive images of people of color in Denmark. There was an overwhelmingly negative narrative, and there were few role models. We hardly knew any women who looked like us. And Selem, brave soul, she made the decision, you know what, Phaedra, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to establish this organization. Would you like to come with me in your journey? And I said, yes, because it's in alignment with my purpose and what I love doing. And so in March 2019, we established Professional Women of Color. And the mission of Professional Women of Color is to increase the visibility of women of color in Denmark, to increase their visibility and their impact. And we do that through providing a safe space where they are inspired, empowered, and can connect, expand their networks, their professional network. We provide sisterhood and community. We also provide concrete personal and professional development activities, masterclasses, wellness events, tailoring your CV, interviewing skills. And we promote images of women of color. Last year, we had a conference on allyship, because it's my belief that it's not the responsibility of the underrepresented group to change things. It's everybody's responsibility, because it benefits all of society. So the title of our conference was The Power of Allyship, Partnering for Change. And at that conference, we established an award for a woman of color who has given impact. So that way we celebrate our role models, we celebrate our achievements, we celebrate our successes. And the role models will be for ourselves, for our friends, our community, but also for our children, because that was all. Both Selim and I have children here, and we want them to be able to see people that they can identify with, that they can relate to. If you don't see it, you can't be it. So community, personal and professional development, visibility and impact. And then the fourth thing that we do is that we contribute to the narrative and discourse around diversity and inclusion. We partner with organizations, we help them in how to go about it, how to implement diversity and inclusion in their organizations. We provide inspirational stories and so on. So that's Fantastic. What we do in Professional Women of Color.
That's amazing, Phaedra. I'm so happy that you mentioned it, that you discussed the story behind your mission and vision regarding Professional Women of Color, your story to moving to Denmark, and also how the organization was founded, because this is key in anyone listening. For anyone listening, if you consider that your journey was easy, this does not apply to everybody else that is living in Denmark or living in the Nordic countries. There's a lot of negative press regarding that is imbalanced regarding different stories that pop up in the media. And what do we do to balance that? Like, how do we make sure that whatever happens at a certain period of time does not become the general idea of a society about a certain part of the population? And that's a question that is in a context that is hard to change or impact if we don't have in place structural organizations. If we don't have a structure on how to balance that, it can become a very hard and a very a mission that continues to impact certain parts of the population. And I'm very happy that you mentioned it, because the mission, first of all, is much needed, and also the organization's role is much needed. And I hope that the listeners will consider going to the description of this episode and checking Professional Women of Color Denmark, and somehow want to impact the organization, because the idea here is also to promote the mission and how others can become allies, like you said, in this mission. Yes. So I'll make sure to link everything and to promote ProWalk everywhere, so people know about it and they have a chance to also impact. I wish we had another hour. I wish we had another hour to talk about all the things we can talk about. But it's time now to go to the final 5 fire questions. And I would like to ask you, what is one book you think everyone should read?
Okay, now I'm supposed to answer very quickly. I don't know. Everybody should read it, because it all depends on your point of departure. But one book that I read at a very young age that has impacted me, it's an old book called Jonathan Livingstone Seagull. And it's about daring to be different, daring to be ambitious. Even if there are naysayers, you walk your path, you continue. I mean, now that I'm older, there's just one thing about the book that disturbed me, in the sense that Jonathan, he moved to the point where he pretty much almost broke, but no, we want to be whole people. We don't drive ourselves over the edge. But the message of daring and going for your goal is something that resonated with me.
Fantastic. Thank you. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
I mentioned it already. You can let things happen to you, or you can make things happen for you.
Fantastic. Who is your role model?
I got another one.
Tell me.
Move, you're not a tree.
I love it. Move, you're not a tree. Well, yeah, that's great. Fantastic. What is your role model, Phaedria?
I have several role models, but for the purposes of this podcast, I would like to say Margrethe Vestager, Danish politician, EU commissioner. I think she's just amazing, very analytical, passionate, dared to take on Google. So
fantastic. What would you choose to do if you were to have another career?
I would still be in science, probably a medical doctor, but not in the traditional sense, only doing research and promoting holistic healing and alternative medicines.
Fantastic. And if you could change places with someone, who would it be and why?
Okay, that's a difficult one, because I love who I am and I'm comfortable where I am. I did think about one thing. If I could change places with somebody, it would be somebody like Elon Musk. And the simple reason is that then I could have the billions of money that I can use to support my cause and change the world and make it a better place for everybody.
Thank you. That's a very interesting answer. I don't think anyone mentioned Elon Musk before, which is, it's good that it's a first, because then we know we have different points of view. So that's very interesting. Thank you so much, Phaedria.
Okay,
it was a pleasure.
Can I just say one thing?
Of course.
The assumption is, if I change places with them, I'm still myself, right?
Yes.
I still have my identity. but I have the means.
The means, yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Phaedria, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Point of views and the way that you see life are very, very important for people to hear about, to consider, and to definitely take some steps towards inclusive leadership, much like you are doing. See you as a role model. So I really appreciate taking the time, sharing more about professional women of color, and giving all of this advice about how you can transform your career. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexandra. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening. Stay tuned for more interviews with inspiring role models.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of FemLead Podcast. Share the news with your friends and follow us on social media at FemLead Podcast everywhere.